Without a doubt, global instability is on the rise. And if you think about it, it all started with Russia annexing Crimea, practically with impunity. Fast forward 12 years, and now we have the biggest war in Europe since World War II, the biggest escalation in the Middle East in decades, another war in Iran, key trading routes being blockaded, NATO facing an existential crisis, and many other conflicts and crises occurring around the world. Today we will continue to describe the war in Ukraine and discuss its impact on the war in Iran. This video is sponsored by you. Unfortunately, the YouTube environment is not great right now, with the algorithm being friendlier to drama and react channels and YouTube being permissive of AI slop. We don't do drama and we don't do AI, but thanks to our members and patrons, our channel continues to make 3 public videos per week, with the team intact and going strong. In recognition of their generosity and contributions, members and patrons receive 2 additional exclusive videos each week, and access many other perks. Join them to watch more than 250 exclusive videos covering every era of history by pressing the join button under the video or the links in the description and pinned comment. As usual, let's start by looking at what happened on the battlefield in the past month. And to be frank, not much has changed in March. The Ukrainians claim that Russia has started another grand offensive, which will make sure that the boys are home by Easter or Christmas at the latest. As with many previous attempts, this campaign has also started with many losses and barely any progress. The chief of Ukraine's unmanned forces, Robert Brovdy, aka Madhyar, claimed that on March 17th, the Russians launched their spring-summer offensive of 2026 by attempting a breakthrough on the Rudinska-Halaya Pola front, trying to take advantage of the fog. According to Madhyar, the initial assault was a disaster, with Russians failing to gain any ground, despite major personnel losses, and there is some video footage confirming heavy equipment losses. Since then, they have captured Frishina, advanced on Zalichnuchna, and made some progress in grey areas along the whole front. But this is hardly a breakthrough. There have also been reports of Russian attempts to attack Orikhiv from the south, but they have been repelled there as well. Meanwhile, Ukraine continued its successful counterattacks north of Huliapola. In March, the 1st Separate Assault Regiment, the 95th Air Assault Brigade, and other Ukrainian forces liberated Novokhrihorivka, Kalinivska, Stepova, Ternova, and Berezova. There have already been numerous reports claiming that the Ukrainian army's success in this sector has forced the Russian command to redeploy units from the Pokrovsk sector and the Kherson front to stabilize the situation. The Donbas fortress belt remains the other key target for the Russian army, and they have failed to achieve any meaningful progress here either. The Russians have managed to expand the grey zone south of Kostiantynivka, but the battles are largely confined to the H20 and TO504 highways. So far, Kostiantynivka proper is under solid Ukrainian control. A similar dynamic is observed on the northern tip of the fortress belt. The Russian army needs to capture Liman to move further southwest toward Slovyansk, but the Russian pincer movement's advance has been slowed by the Ukrainians in recent months. On March 19th, elements of the 1st Guards Tank Army and the 20th Guards Combined Arms Army launched a relatively major assault in this sector, sending armored vehicles into attack, a rare sight these days. But this assault was defeated. However, Russians continued advancing on Slovyansk from the southeast. After capturing the heavily fortified town of Seversk, the Russians have already achieved a relatively steady westward advance towards Slovyansk in the past weeks, which continued in March as well. Meanwhile, the peace negotiations, which were not looking promising anyway because of the gulf in Russia's and Ukraine's positions, have taken a further step back due to the war in Iran. The most realistic scenario is that the war in Ukraine will continue for the foreseeable future. And as always, the ability to maintain the capacity to fight long wars depends on the economy, force generation, military production, strong alliances, and steady morale at home. Russia has been able to maintain stable manpower generation since 2023 by recruiting 30 to 45,000 contract soldiers every month, which is possible because, well, Russia is a wealthy country and still earns a lot of money from selling oil and gas. Sure, Russia has been experiencing economic difficulties, but thus far they are not at a level that would prevent Russia from continuing to recruit men en masse. They have also got enough money to steadily produce missiles, drones, and other deadly weapons. But Ukraine has also enhanced its capacity to hurt Russia with long-range strikes, specifically its military production sites and oil and gas infrastructure. According to Russia's former defense minister Shoigu, Ukraine launched 23,000 drones and missiles on Russian targets in 2025, a massive increase from 6,200 launches in 2024. In March, they made several successful missile strikes to destroy a Shahed storage depot at Donetsk airport and severely damage a microchip factory in Bryansk. The latter is particularly important, since microchips are used for a variety of military purposes, including for precision-guided weaponry, air defense, secure communication, surveillance, and so on. But arguably, the crown jewel of Ukrainian long-range strikes in March was the attack on Russia's oil export ports in Primorsk and Ust-Luga. In combination with the earlier damage to the Druzhba pipeline running through Ukraine to Hungary and Slovakia, along with damage to the port of Novorossiysk and the regular seizure of Russian oil tankers, Ukraine has done a very good job of limiting Russia's oil revenues. According to Reuters calculations, this strategy has temporarily shut down 40% of Russia's crude oil export capabilities, at the time when oil prices skyrocketed due to the war in Iran. Another very curious political development in Russia is the story reported by the independent Russian media outlet The Bell, which claimed that during his March 26th meeting with top Russian businessmen and oligarchs, Putin asked them to chip in for Russia's war effort in Ukraine. The story, corroborated by Financial Times sources, reports that Rosneft chief Igor Sechin came up with this idea. Apparently, one of the wealthiest Russian oligarchs, Suleiman Karimo, immediately offers to donate 100 billion rubles, $1.22 billion, just to give you an idea of how much money we're talking about. If true, this is an important development because of the peculiarity of a social contract between Putin and Russian oligarchs. To give you context, following the fall of the USSR, Soviet industry bosses, enterprise directors, bureaucrats, late Soviet-era entrepreneurs, and people from a few other general groups took advantage of the painful transition from a state-run economy to capitalism to enrich themselves beyond their wildest dreams in Russia in the 1990s. With extreme wealth came considerable political power, which many oligarchs readily used to expand their influence. But the new Russian president, Vladimir Putin, has never been one to like sharing political power, and early in his reign, he met with a large group of oligarchs. There he offered them a deal: keep out of politics, do not challenge my authority, and I will allow you to keep what you have earned or stolen during the wild 1990s. Very few, like Boris Berezovsky, Viktor Gosynsky, and Mikhail Khodorkovsky, dared to defy Putin and suffered the consequences in terms of arrest, asset forfeiture, or exile. The vast majority of oligarchs, though, agreed and continued to thrive under Putin. They were occasionally asked to invest in major projects like the Sochi Olympics or the construction in Crimea. But this one feels totally different. Oleg Deripaska may be the only oligarch who has publicly spoken out against the war in Ukraine, but without a doubt, he is not the only one who opposes the war, resents being sanctioned, and is now being asked to give money for Putin's personal imperial project. As things stand, this may not mean much, since Putin remains in total control of Russia. But if such voluntary compulsory donations are demanded frequently, the richest class in Russia may actually question whether the existing social contract still suits them. In any case, it is something worth mentioning. For now, the war in Iran has added a whole new dimension to the war in Ukraine. First of all, it is a notable positive for Putin and Russia from a public relations standpoint. The attack of the United States and Israel on Iran is illegal under international law, and it gives the Kremlin propaganda a lot of ammunition when the next time comes somebody condemns their invasion of Ukraine. Second, the United States getting bogged down in Iran without a clear endgame is also a plus for Russia. Even though the US military is performing much better than Russia through a purely conventional military lens, this has not been enough to bring the Americans to the assumed strategic finish line of the war. The Kremlin can now more comfortably claim that it is not the only superpower getting in trouble after attacking a smaller nation. But along with such intangible considerations, there are also very real and tangible consequences of the war in Iran on the war in Ukraine. In terms of military political impact, we can mention the excessive reliance of the US and Gulf countries on Patriot air defense to counter the Iranian drone threat. Zelensky claimed that the US and Gulf countries have used 800 Patriot missiles in merely 3 days to shoot down Iranian Shahed drones, more than Ukraine has used throughout its war. Using Patriot missiles, which have a reported cost of $4 to $7 million, to destroy drones, which cost around $50,000, is not feasible in the long term. Not just from the financial standpoint, but also because the United States produces only 600 to 700 Patriot missiles per year. At the current rate of use, the existing stockpile of Patriot missiles may be depleted to the point where they are no longer sold to Ukraine, and Russia recognizes this. In March, they launched more ballistic missiles in packages to force the Ukrainian air defenses to exhaust their Patriot missiles faster. If the war in Iran continues for a few more months, this may turn into a problem for Ukraine. There are conflicting reports on whether the United States will continue providing Patriot missiles to Ukraine. Several media reports have claimed that the US will put the delivery of at least some of the weapons purchased by European countries from America for Ukraine within the Pearl framework, including Patriot missiles, on hold. But Zelensky refuted these claims and expressed gratitude to Trump for continuing military supplies. However, the war in Iran, specifically the threat caused by Iranian drones, has caused a great opportunity for Ukraine as well. Ukraine has a unique experience of countering more advanced versions of Shaheds almost every day, most recently in packages of hundreds. They have developed drone interceptors that are cheaper than the Shaheds they need to shoot down. One of Ukraine's premier drone manufacturers, Skyfall, has estimated that they could scale up their production of drone interceptors to 50,000 per month to cover Ukraine's needs, and then to export the surplus. Trump may think that they know more about drones than anybody, and that the last person they need help from is Zelensky, but the Gulf countries quite clearly disagree. Ukraine has already sent more than 200 military specialists to the Gulf countries to discuss cooperation and ways of countering Iranian drones. Then, at the end of March, Zelensky toured the Gulf countries and signed a 10-year defense agreement with Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE, which he hailed as historic. According to Ukraine's president, they will provide drone interceptors and related technology, naval drones, electronic warfare systems, and related military equipment. What Ukraine will get in return has not been made official, but there are reports and speculations that Kyiv will receive Patriot missiles, or perhaps even Qatar's Mirage 2005 fighter jets. This is a savvy bit of business by Ukraine. They have recognized the opportunity created by their unique military expertise and another crisis in the Middle East to strike an impressive deal, which will expand their foreign influence and international standing. Meanwhile, Russia continues military cooperation with its ally in Iran. They have apparently been providing intelligence to Iran to help them with targeting America's military assets in the region. They are also supplying Tehran with unspecified drones, according to the Financial Times. In terms of the economic impact of the war in Iran so far, Russia is obviously benefiting from the hike in oil prices. A few weeks before Ukraine's strikes on Ust-Luga and Primorsk oil ports, the Financial Times estimated that Russia had been earning an extra $150 million per day from oil sales. Of course, the American decision to temporarily ease sanctions against Russian oil has also been helpful. It is clear that Ukraine is not a priority for Trump right now. Thus, as we mentioned earlier, there has not been much movement in the United States-mediated negotiations to end the war. Instead, we heard more unfriendly tirades from Trump about Zelensky and Ukraine. By now, it should not be a secret that the US president is not especially fond of his Ukrainian colleague, as Trump blames Zelensky for not accepting Putin's demand to withdraw from Donbass. In his interview, Zelensky publicly confirmed that the US is ready to provide unspecified security guarantees only if Ukraine agrees to leave Donbass. Clearly for Trump, it is easier to pressure Ukraine, which still depends on the United States in terms of some military supplies, than Putin, who could just end the war by agreeing to a ceasefire along the current front line. For Trump, just ending the war, no matter how, is more important than ending the war in a just manner. At this point, the EU has become Ukraine's main ally. They pay for the American weapons to supply Ukraine and provide their own military aid. For instance, in March, Germany provided Patriot missiles, an additional €200 million for air defense and drone funding, while Spain signed a defense agreement with Kyiv, which envisages joint military production. But it is not all rosy in Kyiv's relations with the EU. Despite earlier pledging a €90 billion loan to ensure proper financing for Ukraine, Hungary is still preventing the funds from being sent to Kyiv. The Prime Minister, Orbán, who has used the war in Ukraine as one of the central campaign topics for the upcoming pivotal elections, continues blocking the loan, blaming Ukraine for the refusal to repair the Druzhba pipeline. This pipeline, delivering Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia, was damaged by Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory in 2025, and Russian strikes on the Ukrainian side of the pipeline in 2026. Zelensky has acknowledged that he is not keen on repairing the Druzhba pipeline, instead offering delivery via the Odessa-Brody pipeline. But he may have taken a step back to ensure the vital €90 billion loan is delivered. On March 16th, the President of the European Council, von der Leyen, stated that Ukraine has accepted the EU's offer to provide technical support and funding for repairs. But as of March 31st, the payment of the EU loan has still not been resolved. As always, let's conclude our video by reviewing visually confirmed equipment losses for both sides as of March 31st, according to the Oryx blog. Russia has lost at least 4,371 tanks, 10,742 vehicles, 318 command posts and communication stations, 2,315 artillery systems and vehicles, 181 aircraft, and 172 helicopters. Ukraine has lost at least 1,405 tanks, 6,233 vehicles, 88 command posts and communication stations, 1,232 artillery systems and vehicles, 114 aircraft, and 86 helicopters. Further updates on the Russian invasion of Ukraine are on the way. If you don't want to miss them, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.